Hey, welcome to National Bird Day. I'm Adam Roberts, the Executive Vice President of Born Free USA based in Washington, D.C., and I'm so thrilled that we have this day again to recognize the plight of both wild birds and captive birds. It's something that we at Born Free USA have been doing in partnership with the Avian Welfare Coalition since 2002, and it's a really exciting day to call attention to an often forgotten species around the world. We started National Bird Day to do two things. One is to look at the plight of wild birds, birds in the wild around the world who are being decimated by habitat loss, but who are also being poached to supply the global pet markets. But also, secondly, we want to look at the welfare of captive birds. When people take birds into captivity, whether they were caught in the wild, rescued from a shelter, or purpose bred, are they giving these animals, which may be very long-lived and have very complex needs, a life worth living? So Born for USA is very pleased that we've been able to do this National Bird Day every year since 2002. And I, for one, have a personal affinity for birds, as it was one of the first issues that I worked on when I came to Washington, D.C. back in the early 1990s. We worked on legislation called the Wild Bird Conservation Act, which would prohibit some of the most imperiled bird species from being imported into the United States for the pet trade. And that bill, signed in October of 1992 by George Bush, the first George Bush president, made a dramatic difference in terms of poaching around the world. But we still obviously need to be vigilant about what's happening to birds to make sure that they can survive in perpetuity. And I'm really excited that one of the ways that I've seen that we're able to call attention to the plight of birds 20 years later is through films like Parrot Confidential, put together by Allison Argo at Argo Films. And we're going to have Allison with us now to talk a little bit about the making of the film, some of the complexities of both capturing birds in the wild and also how we care for them in captivity, and all the other issues that we need to keep in mind as we undertake this, our National Bird Day 2014. So there's very little about Parrot Confidential that Allison Argo didn't have a hand in, from producing, writing, directing, and narrating the film. And so we're very pleased to have her with us for a few minutes to introduce the work that she did on the film and why it's so important for us all to see. So Allison, welcome, and tell us a little bit about the film, your background, and what you found so fascinating about birds as you produced this incredible picture.
Thanks for having me on this important day for this important event. Um, Really, the seeds for this film were planted over 20 years ago when a family member of mine bought a yellow-naped Amazon parrot without knowing anything about birds at all. And she thought this would be a great gift for her husband who had just broken his leg and was housebound. Well, the husband hated Rico. Rico hated the husband. It was a complete disaster for both the bird and the family. And Rico was shuffled off to another household, I don't know where. And I don't actually know what happened to Rico, but I've always felt like I owed Rico something. He definitely got a bad deal on that one. And later in life, after I became a filmmaker and started addressing a lot of issues that deal with animal welfare, I became more and more aware of what was happening to birds and that there were a lot of other parrots like Rico that were shuffled from household to household. And when they live for 80 years, perhaps 80 years, that's a lot of households. Somebody once said that these parrots seem to have an expiration date, meaning people just, they burn out. They can do it for so long, most people, and then they just had enough of the noise, the destruction. And so I felt it was really important to raise awareness, basically so that people would be educated when, if they thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool to own a parrot? They'd have an idea of what parrots are and what they need, that they're wild animals, they're unpredictable, that they were born to fly, that they need sunshine, they need a varied diet, they need to go to avian veterinarians. It's not an easy pet. Dogs and cats have been domesticated for thousands of years. They've been bred to be pets. Birds are not like that. Parrots have been taken from the wild, and some of them may be 2 generations old in captivity, but they're still wild, and they still have very, very specific instincts. And if we're going to keep them as pets in captivity, those need to be addressed. So that's what I set out to do, is sort of, I guess, lift the veil that's been kind of sitting over these parrots for decades.
And Allison, for people who aren't as aware as perhaps you and I from all the work we've done on this issue over the past 20 years about the plight of captive birds and what they need and why they're so difficult to keep in captivity, how has the reception of the documentary been from being shown on PBS to everywhere else that people have had a chance to view it? Have people been receptive to what you've had to offer them?
Oh, the reception has been amazing. Mostly the comments are, I had no idea. I just had no idea how bright they are, how intelligent, how sentient. They have feelings. They think for themselves. I mean, it's all so clear. Once you do meet a parrot, you get it instantly. There's a lot going on in those highly intelligent brains, and the bodies are very unique and need certain things are very hard, that's very hard to provide in captivity. But in the film, when you watch the film, if you haven't already, you'll see that I included quite a bit about wild parrots, because I don't think you can talk about captive parrots without looking at their wild cousins and the lives that they would be leading if they were not in a cage or sitting on top of a cage or in a small aviary. Um, a lot of them mate for life, or at least mate for very long periods of time. They raise their young for years at a time. The chicks will stay with the adults. They're flock birds. And so a parrot in the wild is rarely alone. And yet think of the ordinary parrot in captivity that, the owner has to go to work 8 hours a day. This bird is shut in a cage or in a small room without anybody there, and that's very unnatural for these birds. So I wanted to try to connect the dots between the wild and captivity, because I think we really shouldn't lose sight of that. Oh,
Yeah, I think what you mentioned, that complexity and the relationship between wild birds and captive birds, is hugely important. And when I think about the number of people in America specifically who are interested in bird issues, whether it's the 46 million people who are bird watchers or the many millions of people who have birds in their homes, it's vital that that connection is made. I talked about the legislation we worked on a minute ago, and that was one of our mottos back then, that wild birds should fly free. And I think anybody who's going to have a bird as a companion needs to make sure they consider that to ensure that that bird has an excellent quality of care. So, we so often talk in the advocacy world in which I operate about the need for people to take action. And I wonder if I'm using your documentary as a tool to try and educate people, as you quite clearly know it's doing, to take action on behalf of birds, are there some takeaways that people should have once they see the film, things that they should do if they're inspired to act on behalf of birds once they've seen the documentary?
well, there are bird sanctuaries, parrot sanctuaries throughout the country, and they're struggling with very little funding to take in as many parrots, unwanted parrots, as they can, and also to raise awareness and educate. And these organizations need our help. If you know of a parrot who lives in your neighbor's basement, who's not getting the attention that he or she deserves, talk to the people, talk to a sanctuary. So you can protect the individuals. You can also go and volunteer at a sanctuary. You can provide financial support if you're not able to volunteer. If you feel that you really can offer a great home to a parrot, there are so many parrots in need. Do not buy a parrot, adopt a parrot. Support legislation. There are very few regulations on captive parrots. And I think it's an area that we really need to start working on to protect these animals in captivity. But the other component in the film is that a third of wild parrot species are endangered. And we need to protect those animals out there in the wild and do everything we can to support groups that are out there protecting them, raise awareness locally, just everything you can do. If you can donate even your typing skills, if you don't have any money, if you take great photographs, volunteer your photography at a local rescue. There's so many ways that you can help. Hold a bake sale. Everything makes a difference. It all starts with an individual.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And all that talk about sanctuaries and sanctuaries who need assistance, I'll just add that we have an organization called the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, which accredits wildlife rescue places based on a set of very strong criteria. And a number of these GFAS accredited facilities do have birds. So if people want to act and want to support these rescue operations, but also need to know a good one from a not so good one, it's one place, one resource they can take advantage of. to identify the sanctuaries that are reputable and make sure they're giving them the support that they need. So it's a great idea to support bird rescue facilities. Well, this is all definitely inspirational, and I'm so pleased that you took some time out. I know you're about to leave the country to go back to Costa Rica and do some more filming of wild birds, and I'm hugely jealous. I've had the opportunity to be with some bird watchers, some true blue bird watchers in Madagascar and Venezuela, and I can see how enthusiastic they are, and it really inspired me to appreciate these animals in the wild where they belong. So I'm glad you'll have the opportunity to do that. It's obviously well deserved after this documentary has opened the eyes of so many people. And so I would just encourage everybody in honor of National Bird Day to visit nationalbirdday.org, where you can get a link and you can actually watch the documentary, Parrot Confidential, if you haven't already, right on the web. So thank you very much, Allison. Safe travels, and thank you for everything you're doing for birds. I appreciate it.
Thank you.